June 23, 2025, the R61 highway between Mathatha and Nkobo. A black sedan speeds through the Eastern Cape darkness. Inside, 6 armed men. At the wheel, Zola Bishop Yolelo, the most feared name in South Africa's taxi underworld. They don't know it yet, but they're driving straight into an ambush. Within minutes, the night will explode in gunfire. The vehicle will be riddled with bullets, and the man who called himself Bishop, who rose from washing cars to commanding an empire of fear, will take his last breath on the asphalt he once ruled. This is where our story ends. But to understand how Bishop Yolelo met his violent fate, we need to go back to the poverty-stricken townships of the Eastern Cape, back to an industry born in apartheid's dying days, back to where a car washer with nothing to lose decided he would take everything. The year is 1988. South Africa's apartheid government makes a decision that will unleash decades of bloodshed. They deregulate the 16-seater minibus taxi industry. Overnight, what was once controlled becomes a free-for-all. No rules, no oversight, just whoever can grab the most routes, make the most money, spill the most blood. It's into this chaos that men like Zola Yolelo emerge, not as businessmen, but as warlords. Picture the Eastern Cape in the 1990s, one of South Africa's poorest provinces, nearly 60% living below the poverty line. Formal jobs? Forget it. For young men in the townships, there are 2 options: starve or fight. The taxi industry offers a third way, if you're willing to get your hands dirty. And Yolelo? He's more than willing. He starts at the bottom, a nobody washing cars at the taxi rank, then a conductor, collecting fares, learning the routes, watching how the bosses operate. But Yolelo sees something others don't. He sees that in this new South Africa, violence isn't just profitable, it's power. While others dream of democracy bringing change, Yolelo builds his empire on fear. By 2010, the car washer has transformed. He co-founds the Eastern Cape Transport Tertiary Cooperative. Sounds legitimate, doesn't it? A formal structure to help taxi operators with financing. But those who know better whisper about what really moves through those books. Money from protection rackets, profits from routes seized at gunpoint, the blood money that flows when rivals disappear. The ascent continues. Local associations fall under his control. The Uncedo Mathatha Taxi Association, the OR Tambo Regional Council, each position bringing more power, more territory, more fear. By 2022, Yolelo sits as chairman of Santaco's entire Eastern Cape division. Some reports even call him national chairperson, from car washer to kingpin in 3 decades. But here's what makes Yolelo different from your average criminal. He doesn't hide in the shadows. No, the bishop walks in daylight, draped in false authority. He calls himself a chief, though the real traditional leaders, the Abathembu royal house, publicly denounce him as a fraud. Courts confirm he has no legitimate claim. But when you have assault rifles backing your words, who needs legitimacy? The protection racket becomes his signature. Taxi drivers in Mathatha West know the deal. Pay the bishop's fee or find your vehicle torched. Refuse his terms and maybe you don't make it home. It's not complicated. It's pure extortion, dressed up as business. And it works because everyone knows the bishop doesn't make empty threats. Consider the mechanics of his operation. Every morning before the sun rises, taxi drivers arrive at the ranks. They should be thinking about passengers, routes, making an honest living. Instead, they're calculating whether they've paid enough to stay alive. The bishop's collectors move through the ranks like sharks. A nod here means you're safe. A frown there means trouble. And trouble in Yolelo's world has only one currency: blood. 2018 should have been the end. Police go public with wanted notices. Zola Yolelo sought for at least 5 taxi-related murders around Mathatha, Kumbu, Tsolo, Libode, and Nkaleni. They offer rewards for information, but nobody talks. Because in the Eastern Cape, the bishop's reach extends far beyond his taxi routes. He's untouchable, or so it seems. The violence escalates. Rival operators gunned down in broad daylight. Witnesses vanish before they can testify. The taxi ranks become killing fields where disputes are settled with bullets, not words. And through it all, Yolelo maintains his dual identity. By day, a Santaco leader talking about industry reform. By night, an extortion kingpin counting blood money. Let me paint you a picture of how these murders unfold. A rival operator may be someone who dared to run a route without paying tribute. He's loading passengers one morning, checking his mirrors, counting change. Then a motorcycle appears. 2 men. The passenger raises something dark and metallic. The sound tears through the morning air. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, the motorcycle is gone, and another body bleeds out on South African soil. Then comes June 2025. The Eastern Cape floods, devastating communities. Children need transport to school across swollen rivers. One of Yolelo's own Santaco minibuses, packed with 13 school children, attempts to cross a damaged bridge. The raging water sweeps it away. Only 5 children survive. 8 young lives lost in the muddy torrent. 2 weeks. That's all the time between those children drowning and Yolelo's final ride. Some might call it karma. Others, coincidence. But in the world of South African crime, timing is everything. And the police? They've been watching, waiting, planning. The intelligence reports pile up. Extortion complaints from taxi operators. Threats against humanitarian workers trying to deliver flood relief. Allegedly, Yolelo's crew demanding payment for access to desperate communities. Even disaster becomes a business opportunity in the bishop's world. Gift of the Givers, trying to bring water to flood victims, reportedly faces demands, pay up or stay out. The bishop's empire feeds on misery. The noose tightens, but the bishop doesn't see it. Or maybe he does and doesn't care. When you've been untouchable for so long, you forget you're still made of flesh and blood. You forget that even bishops can fall. Enter the National Intervention Unit. Elite police officers who don't play by taxi mafia rules. They've done their homework. They know the routes. They know the vehicles. They know that on the night of June 23rd, Yolelo will be traveling the R61. What they don't know is that he'll have 5 armed associates with him. But they're ready for war. The ambush unfolds like a military operation. Police vehicles materialize from the darkness. Blue lights cutting through the night. Commands shouted. Weapons drawn. In that split second, Yolelo and his men make their choice. They could surrender, face the courts, maybe even beat the charges like so many times before. Instead, they choose the gun. The night erupts. Automatic weapons fire tears through the air. Muzzle flashes lighting up the highway like deadly fireworks. The police, trained for this moment, respond with overwhelming force. It's not a shootout, it's an execution played out in real time. When the smoke clears, when the last shell casing hits the asphalt, 6 bodies lie still. The bishop's reign is over. But let's pause here. 6 men dead on a highway. No trial, no testimony, no chance to face their accusers. Yes, they were armed. Yes, they allegedly fired first. But in a country still healing from apartheid's wounds, every police shooting carries weight. Every use of lethal force must be questioned, even when the dead are killers. Santaco releases a statement. They mourn their principled leader with his unwavering commitment. They praise his work in formalizing the taxi industry. No mention of the wanted posters. No mention of the mothers whose sons never came home. No mention of the protection money that funded his rise. Just grief for a fallen comrade. But the police tell a different story. Brigadier Nobuntu Gantana lays out the facts. An intelligence-driven operation. A sting targeting an extortion ring. Armed suspects who opened fire first. Self-defense, pure and simple. The Independent Police Investigative Directorate will investigate as they always do. But the message is clear. The law finally caught up with the bishop. The aftermath reveals the scope of Yolelo's network. Forensic teams recover weapons from the scene. Ballistics will likely match them to other crimes, other shootings, other deaths. But the 5 men who died alongside him, their names remain hidden, just footnotes in the bishop's bloody legacy, anonymous soldiers in a war that continues without them. Who were these men? Brothers? Cousins? Young men drawn to the bishop's promises of power and wealth? We'll never know their stories, never understand what drove them to that highway that night, that choice to draw weapons against police. They're erased, reduced to 5 armed associates in official reports. But somewhere, mothers wait for sons who won't come home. Somewhere, children lose fathers to the taxi wars. Some call him a Robin Hood figure, a man who rose from nothing to provide for his community. But where's the charity in extortion? Where's the nobility in murdered rivals? These myths always emerge when criminals die dramatically. The human need to find meaning in violence, to pretend there was honor among thieves. There wasn't. Others paint him as a victim of circumstance, a product of poverty and apartheid's legacy. And yes, the Eastern Cape's desperation created men like Yolelo. But thousands face the same poverty without becoming killers. Millions struggle without building empires on fear. Circumstances explain. They don't excuse. The truth is simpler and uglier. Zola Bishop Yolelo was a predator who found his hunting ground in South Africa's broken taxi industry. He exploited the chaos for profit. He murdered for market share. He dressed his crimes in the language of business and tradition, but underneath, it was always about power and money. Always about taking what he wanted, no matter the cost in blood. The African Transformation Movement releases its own statement. Spokesperson Zama Nshona doesn't mourn. Instead, he calls for the death penalty for repeat violent offenders. It's a shocking response, but it reflects something real: the public exhaustion with taxi violence, the desperation for solutions, even extreme ones. When bodies pile up year after year, people stop believing in rehabilitation. They just want the killing to stop. Today, the taxi ranks of Mthatha still echo with violence. New players emerge to fill the void. The protection rackets continue under different management. The same mothers still pray their sons come home safe. Because killing the bishop didn't kill the system that created him. It just opened a position at the top. The forensic evidence tells its own story. Weapons recovered, documents seized, connections traced. But will justice reach beyond that highway shooting? Will the corruption that enabled Yolelo's rise face reckoning? Or will this be another chapter in South Africa's endless cycle, where kingpins fall but kingdoms endure? Consider the broader context. South Africa's taxi industry moves 15 million people daily. It's the circulatory system of the nation's economy, but it operates in a twilight zone between legal and illegal, formal and informal. This gray area breeds men like Yolelo. It rewards violence. It punishes honesty. Until that changes, the bishops will keep rising. The Independent Police Investigative Directorate continues its investigation. Questions linger about the use of force, about whether 6 men needed to die that night, about whether this was justice or something else dressed in a uniform. These questions matter. Even when the dead are killers, how they die shapes the society we become. In the end, what legacy does the bishop leave? Not the reformed taxi industry Santako eulogizes, not the traditional leadership he falsely claimed. He leaves bullet holes in family trees, empty chairs at dinner tables, a trail of trauma through the Eastern Cape that will take generations to heal. He leaves proof that in South Africa's taxi industry, violence still pays, until it doesn't. But perhaps most tragically, he leaves a template, a blueprint for the next ambitious car washer who looks at the taxi ranks and sees opportunity, who learns that fear trumps law, that guns speak louder than permits, that in the absence of real authority, false authority will do. The R61 highway runs quiet now where Yolelo died. Cars pass without knowing a kingdom fell here. But in the taxi ranks, in the whispered conversations between drivers, everyone knows. The bishop is dead. Long live whoever's ruthless enough to take his place. This is the tragedy of South Africa's taxi wars. Not just the blood spilled, but the certainty that more will flow. Not just the criminals who rise, but the system that elevates them. Not just the violence that ends lives, but the poverty that makes violence seem like the only way up. Zola Bishop Yolelo rose from washing cars to washing money, from collecting fares to collecting lives, from nobody to nightmare. And on a dark highway in June, he discovered what every kingpin learns too late. Empires built on blood always end in blood. The question isn't whether there will be another bishop. There will be. The question is whether South Africa can break the cycle that creates them, whether the taxi industry can transform from battlefield to business, whether young men in townships can find paths to power that don't run through graveyards. Until then, the bishops will rise, the bishops will reign, and the bishops will fall. While mothers weep and the taxi wars rage on. The night swallowed 6 men on the R61. But in South Africa's killing fields, the darkness never really lifts. It just waits for the next bishop to claim his crown. And somewhere in the Eastern Cape tonight, he's already planning his ascension. Who will pay for all of this? Who will answer for the children swept away in floods while their bishop counted extortion money? Who will face justice for the years of terror dressed as taxi leadership? These questions echo through the Eastern Cape like gunshots in the night, unanswered, unending, unforgettable. The bishop is dead, but his kingdom of fear? That lives on in every protection payment, every missing rival, every mother who wonders if today's the day her son doesn't come home. This is South Africa's taxi mafia, where car washers become kings, where business runs on bullets, where the only retirement plan is a police ambush on a dark highway. And somewhere tonight, another young man watches the taxi ranks, sees the power, tastes the possibility, and decides that maybe, just maybe, he could be the next bishop. God help us all.